The Heritage of Alaska. Brought to you in the public interest by the National Bank of Alaska. Here is your host, Elmer Rasmussen.
February 21, 1924 was a terribly cold day in the interior of Alaska. Fred Milligan, wrapped in furs, was driving his dog team with the U.S. mail through the deep snow on the divide between the Yukon watershed and the Kuskokwim. It was a 20-day run from Nenana to McGrath, and the going was tough. Suddenly his dogs stopped. They looked back. Then they looked up. Then Fred heard the noise. It got louder and louder. As the small single-engine plane passed overhead, the pilot waved from the open cockpit. The flying machine disappeared in the direction of McGrath. Before Fred and his dogs trotted wearily to the end of that day's run, the plane passed overhead again. On the way back from McGrath, it dipped its wings to the veteran mail carrier and sped on its way. February 21, 1924 was a milestone in Alaskan history as Ben Eielson, a Fairbanks schoolteacher turned aviator, proved that carrying the mail by flying machine was practical, safe, economical, and fast. The earliest flyers in Alaska were a lusty lot, and their hair-racing experiences with temperamental single-engine airplanes are recounted with gusto in Gene Potter's book, The Flying North. And by general consensus, Ben Eielson was the greatest of Alaska's early-day pilots. President Hoover presented him with the Harmon Trophy for being the first man to fly across the polar sea from Alaska to Spitsbergen, and he was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. Eielson Air Force Base, south of Fairbanks, is named in his honor. Ben Eielson arrived in Fairbanks in 1922 to teach math in high school, but what he really wanted to do was fly. He sold Fairbanksans on forming an aviation company, and after his polar flight, investment money came easy. He brought new planes to Fairbanks and developed a booming aviation business. Then the early winter of 1929, the American fur trading ship Nanak was frozen in the ice off the Siberian coast. Eielson and Company was offered $50,000 cash to ferry the furs and passengers to Alaska. From their base at the tiny settlement of Teller, Alaska, facing Siberia, daring pilots made one successful flight to the Nanak. Then came the worst blizzard in years. And for 30 consecutive days, Ben Eielson and his men were confined by snowdrifts and a howling gale. The tempers grew short and the crews snapped at each other. Finally, one pilot exploded at Eielson. "You can sit here if you like, Ben Eielson, but I'm leaving for the Nanak." And with that, he took off into the howling storm. Half an hour later, without saying a word, Eielson and his mechanic revved up their plane and headed for Siberia. And shortly thereafter, the first pilot made his precarious way back to Teller, foiled by fog, sleet, and driving gale. Eielson and his mechanic were never seen alive again. As soon as the storm broke, an air hunt unparalleled in the history of the Arctic took place over the Bering Sea and Siberia. 11 weeks later, the mangled wreck of Eielson's plane was found in a snowdrift on the Siberian coast. The plane had struck at full power. The flyer who discovered Ben Eielson's plane was another of Alaska's famed aviators, Joe Crossan. He and a dozen other pilots paced through the pages of this flying north. Sig Ween, Jack Jefford, Jim Dodson, Pearl Gillum, Archie Ferguson, and glacier pilot Bob Reeve of Reeve Aleutian Airways. I know you'll enjoy every exciting episode of The Flying North by Gene Potter.
The Heritage of Alaska has been brought to you in the public interest by the National Bank of Alaska, your statewide banking institution with 21 locations to serve you. Be with Elmer Rasmussen again next week at this same time when he relates another story in The Heritage of Alaska.